The Bearcats got a favorable draw with the Big 12 schedule for 2023, but does that mean we can raise our expectations for this team?
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What a fun show we have for you today right here on Locked On Bearcats. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available everywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to our Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel and follow it to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Today's episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I'm Alex Frank, your host each and every day, and today, what a show, as I mentioned at the top, we have for you. This is a Bearcast Media reunion. I'm joined currently by my right-hand man, Zach Freeze. He was my co-host on Sports Any Way You Wanted. We also co-hosted an NFL show, which we podcasted during the COVID year while we were at school at Cincinnati. Sean McMahon, who took over for being a sports director, is going to hopefully join us here later on in the show. So, Zach, you've got a lot going on. You've got yourself two podcasts now that we'll get to towards the end of the show. But you and I had a long conversation about this Bearcats team, the schedule last week. Where are you at right now with Scott Satterfield? We're 2 months in. How are you feeling, Zach? Are you feeling better about the hire? Are you still a little skeptical? Where are you at right now?
Well, first of all, Alex, thanks for having me on. It's great to be back, running it back with you from the old Bearcast days. But no, in terms of Scott Satterfield, look, I think so far not too much complain about, right? I mean, I thought they had to hit the portal hard. With so many guys leaving, and you lose so many guys to the draft and the portal and all that. So they had to hit the portal hard, and they did. And I'm pretty satisfied, I think, with what Scott Satterfield did. You look at the offensive line was a question mark last year. I mean, how much they struggled to run the ball. Well, they went out, they got Trevor Dozovich, they got Luke Kandra, an elder grad, no big deal. They got Daniel Griesiak, who I really like from Utah State to help with the pass rush, because you lose Majay Sanders 2 years ago, didn't quite have that same thing, that same pass rush this past year. And then look, they had no receivers, and they went out and they restocked that room. Now there's no Jamar Chases, there's no Glizzy Gobblers here, but they went and they got some guys I think that can help. You look at Donovan Ollie from Washington State. I think Sterling Burkhalter was a guy that, with a little upside. He was, he still got 3 or 4 years left. But, I mean, Alex, the key, and I think you'd agree, Emory Jones is how we're going to look at this class. If Emory Jones works out for this year, I think we're going to look at this class differently. If not, if he doesn't, maybe not quite as favorable, because that's important, and there was up and down quarterback play last year. Ben Bryant wasn't bad, but, he had his ups and downs. And so let's see what Emory Jones has. He had coming off a bad year at Arizona State, but he's in the past at Florida. He looked pretty good in that 1 year at Florida at times. So to me, the Emory Jones is going to be kind of the lasting, really what defines this class, I think, for Scott Satterfield. But so far not too bad. Can't be too disappointed, I don't think.
All right, let's go to the quarterback Freeze, because I think that it is a much more extensive battle this year than it was last year. I think last year, despite the intrigue of Evan Prater starting, and he did have a good spring, and he was closing the gap with Ben Bryant, but ultimately Bryant got the starting nod for a reason, and the last 2 games of the season showed that. So what are your thoughts on the quarterback room right now? I think a lot of us are thinking Emory Jones is going to be the starter, but Ben Bryant's back. This will be his sixth season of college football. Evan Prater is still here. Maybe he does better in the Scott Satterfield system. But What are your thoughts on the quarterback battle, Freeze? Like, and I've gone in depth on it on this show throughout the offseason. We're going to continue to, do that until the season starts. But where are you at, Freeze? Where are you at with the quarterback room right now?
Well, it's certainly interesting. I mean, you have I think you have four guys that realistically are going to come into camp and think they're going to be the starting quarterback, right? I think obviously Emory Jones, who I think is going to have he's going to have an edge coming into spring ball just because that's Scott Satterfield's guy. He brought him in. So I think you got to give him an edge in that department. But look, Ben Bryant has 2 full years starting in college football, 2 full years as a starter. He was obviously the starter last year and then a year at EMU. So you have him, and then Evan, who was kind of like supposed to be this hometown hero, highest rated recruit. It hasn't quite panned out, but I mean, he's still, you never know with a guy like that. And then Brady Lichtenberg's another guy who I know a lot of people, I think at UC, think could go start in the MAC, right? Like I think people are high on Brady Lichtenberg, but I think he's kind of the 4th guy. So I'm really surprised, to be honest with you, that Ben Bryant came back and Evan Prater and Lichtenberg all came back, right? I thought at least one of them would transfer, maybe 2 of them would transfer. But I mean, look, having depth in the quarterback room, it's not a bad thing, right? You have, at least guys that have started, multiple games before. I know Evan Prater didn't start a ton, but he got he got his feet wet last year, and debate about how it went and where he is in terms of maybe now we're in his 4th year and he's only made 1 start, so still some inexperience. But I mean, I don't know. It's not a bad problem to have, but I'll say this: I'd be surprised if Lichtenberg, Prater, and Ben Bryant are all here by the start of fall camp. I would be a little bit surprised. I think you'll probably see some sort of movement in that room, one way or the other. You get a feel for spring ball and how that shakes out.
And talk to me about Evan Prater because I look at it, Freeze. The last 2 games of last year, he struggled. But those were not ideal circumstances for him to be starting it. Win or go home game against Tulane. And granted, I didn't think he was terrible in that game. I thought passing wise was a struggle, but he did run the ball well. The Wasabi Fenway Bowl was just a disaster. I mean, the Bear, Cincinnati could not run the ball. They couldn't move the ball. 7 sacks, which is so uncharacteristic for a Bearcats offensive line. So, and I only ask you because, with this quarterback class, I think Emory Jones brings the most upside. Ben Bryant brings the most experience. You alluded to it. He has started 2 full seasons of college football, and that's something that we can expand upon this offseason. Brady Lichtenberg, Brady Drogosh, Jacob Hoyen. I mean, but Evan Prater. And I say his name because he is the highest commit in the 24/7 sports era for Bearcats football. And yet, he has only gotten 2 starts. Now, given the circumstances, are you taking much away from those first 2 starts? Or are you saying, you know what? New coach, new system. Maybe there's still something that can be unlocked with Evan Prater. Where are you at with him, Freeze?
Well, I think with Evan Prater, maybe a little bit of the problem was we had in our mind that he was going to be like a savior. Like he was going to kind of come in, not a savior, but like he was going to be the hometown hero. He was going to be just he could be Desmond Ritter, just like Desmond Ritter, maybe even better just because of the pure talent we thought we saw. I think Evan Prater's talented, but I think it's easy to see why Ben Bryant beat him out. And I know a lot of people were clamoring last year, Evan Prater should be starting over Ben Bryant coming into the season, and then Ben Bryant should be benched for him. But I think we saw, Alex, that yes, he's a good athlete. Yes, his legs are great. They're a great weapon. But in terms of as a passer, he just in the time that we saw him, it was erratic, right? Like he had weird. I felt like there were a couple throws or a couple times where it would take him forever to wind up and throw. Like it felt like you didn't know. There was no consistency with it, the way he was throwing the ball. Like sometimes it would be, it would take him like a couple seconds to throw like a swing pass that like the ball needs to get out quicker. And so I think just like the inconsistencies of him as a passer and a lot of different aspects, missing guys low. And it's not like I don't want to bash Evan Prater. Like you're right. I think in the Tulane game, I don't think he was awful. I mean, he made some plays with his feet that, not a lot of quarterbacks are going to be able to make, but in terms of a consistent passer, I just think that's where he just isn't as polished. And maybe another off season. Look, it's your fourth off season, or third. It's going to be his fourth year, senior year. Maybe another year. I don't know. Maybe more reps will help with that. But coming into this camp, he's probably third in the pecking order. So you don't want to say like never. You don't want to count out a guy who had, is the highest ranked recruit in UC football history. But we only have when you've got two guys ahead of him on the depth chart, and you only have 2 years of eligibility left, I think, or maybe 3. He might have 3. The COVID year throws everything out of loop. He might have 3 years, but it's starting to think maybe we kind of build him as something he's not going to be, right? And I don't want to rule it out entirely, but I think we maybe thought, oh, can I come in? Ritter's going to hand the keys to him, and we're going to be off and running. And maybe he's just not going to be that.
I think it's a great point because I think when Desmond Ridder left after the Cotton Bowl in the college football playoff, we all thought, okay, the torch is going to be passed to Evan Prater, but then Ben Bryant transfers back, and that I think kind of reset expectations for the quarterback room. And Ben Bryant ultimately didn't pan out the way that I think a lot of us hoped for, but I think in a way a lot of us maybe wanted to see Evan Prater because of Ben Bryant's struggles and the fact that the offense, as Mo Egger alluded to on this show yesterday, that the offense didn't really have any really excitement to it. And I think that's what a guy like Prater or Drogosh or Emory Jones can provide. Now, Freeze, we'll get into the Big 12 schedule in just a minute because we were talking about that last week. And while the draw is favorable, that doesn't necessarily mean expectations should be raised. We'll explain why after I tell you how this episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel. This you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better because they have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. Super Bowl 57 between the Chiefs and the Eagles. 3 Cincinnati Bearcats in this game, the Kelsey brothers and Brian Cook. I still like the Eagles -1.5, and I still like a slight over at 50.5. So, again, with FanDuel, the FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. I love the FanDuel app. It's so easy to use. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/LockedOn to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks again for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Back here on Locked On Bearcats, a Bearcat today. I'm Alex Frank, former sports director of Bearcast Media, and of course, current host of Locked On Bearcats. Zach Freeze, my former right-hand man. Sean McMahon, former sports director, hopefully going to join us in just a matter of minutes, hopefully sometime before the end of the show. Okay, Zach, so The Big 12 schedule was released last week. I'm going to be honest, I really, really like the draw because you avoid Kansas State, you avoid TCU, you avoid Texas, you avoid Texas Tech, you get Oklahoma at home, you get BYU in September as opposed to November, you get UCF in November, you get Houston in November as opposed to September. I mean, and you're home essentially the whole month of October. Like, this could not have played out any better for the Bearcats in their first season, right?
I agree with you, actually. I don't know that you could – I don't know. You could have drawn it up much better, Alex, because not just like, I think the schedule's favorable. I believe they avoided those are the top 4 teams that they avoided: TCU, Kansas State, Texas Tech. You avoid all those. And you get Oklahoma at home. You still get Baylor at home. Like, those are going to be fun atmospheres, fun games. And UCF, you keep that going. I think that'll be fun. And West Virginia is back. We got West Virginia back. Going to be terrible. So I think that's another good thing, bringing that rivalry back. So I'm with you. I think it's winning in terms of winning, and hopefully, having a decent showing in your first year in the Big 12. I think it works out well, and you still get. It's not like you totally avoid getting good teams for your fans. Coming into Nippert, you want at least to have some exciting teams coming in, and you have Oklahoma and you have Baylor, I think, who's going to be improved. But Oklahoma, for years we had to play them at Paul Brown. They wouldn't come to Nippert. Now you're going to have to come. You're going to have to come to Nippert. So that'll be exciting. I'm really excited about the schedule, and like you said, I think I don't know how you could draw it up much better.
I think another thing, too, I like is you get Oklahoma at home to start your Big 12 campaign. First ever Big 12 game. You're facing its hallmark program at home. And then you get BYU, which going out there is not going to be easy. But you get those 2 conference games out of the way, first 2 games. And yeah, BYU on a short week is going to be a tall order. But again, favorable. You go to BYU in September. And I mean, it could still be 90 degrees out there. I mean, but it could also be a little colder. So I do think Freeze, with this schedule, and I said to you last week, I think the Bearcats can go 8-4. And the more I think about it, that might not be realistic because they're rebuilding at several key positions, because we don't know who the quarterback is going to be. But I still think about that. You just never know, because I look at the defense and how strong they're going to be. And I say to myself, if the defense is as good as last year, they're going to be in every single game because of that. Is that a fair assessment? Is that an accurate assessment to you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think the defense is going to drop off all that much, Alex. I think on the defensive line, you bring back Jawan Briggs and Dante Corleone's back, Malik Van's back. And then you bring in Daniel Griesiak, who I mentioned earlier. I like the safeties too, Brian Threats and Armorion Smith. So I don't think there's going to be much of a drop-off, and I think you can kind of come in at least feeling pretty good about where you are defensively, even facing some, obviously the offenses, you're going to be facing some high-powered offenses, Oklahoma State, those are, they're going to air it out quite a bit. But, I think you got to feel good about who you are defensively. I think you're at least going to be able to hang your hat on it. And I know especially with so much, I feel like there's so much more new on the offensive side, not knowing who the quarterback is, like you said. O-line's going to have new starters. Receiver room is basically totally, you had to retool that. So I think you're right. I think the defense is something that they're going to have to hang their hat on. Like, that's going to be incredibly important. And they have at least some sort of continuity with a lot of guys coming back, especially up front, which I think is huge.
Okay, so there's one thing that I have been thinking about recently, and that is, yes, the offensive line, we don't know really anything outside of, I guess, can you even definitively say Gavin Gerhardt's going to start?
I don't know. That's maybe, but
I mean, yeah, I mean, former Elder Panther Luke Kandrzak is an Elder grad, if you haven't picked up on it yet. Sean McMahon, who's hopefully going to join us, is also an Elder grad. So I
yeah,
got two Elder Panthers with me on the show today. Plus, I mean, our good friend Elliot rearing. So, I mean,
a lot of
what is
elder,
this? Oh,
elder everywhere.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, how
Yeah.
about that? So um, anyway, but aside from the offensive line being unknown, so Scott Satterfield took over Louisville in 2019. The year before that was Louisville's first season post Lamar Jackson. So they go 2-10, they bottom out, they bring in Satterfield. Their offensive line wasn't very good that year. As I mentioned, they were tied for third to last, or 127th in the country in sacks allowed. But their offensive yards per game went up by almost 100. And you know why that is, Zach? I think it's because they had a dual threat quarterback in Malik Cunningham. And say what you want about Malik Cunningham. And I've heard people from Louisville say to me that, yes, Scott Satterfield was a good recruiter, but his recruits never, panned out. Okay. Well, I mean, it's one thing. And I think in the Luke Fickell era, which I'm not just going to dismiss it because of the way he left. Zach, you agree with me on this. What Luke Fickell did for this program will never be forgotten, and that's why you can never compare Scott Satterfield to Luke Fickell. Even if Scott Satterfield wins a national championship, you can't compare him to Luke Fickell with what he did. When someone like Luke Fickell puts you on the map, that can never be replicated. It can be built upon by the next head coach. So I look at what Scott Satterfield did with Malik Cunningham in Louisville in 2019. And again, recruiting's one thing, developing's another thing. And we were blessed in the Fickell era. I'm circling back to the point I was trying to make. The Fickell era was both about recruiting and developing, Freeze. And with Satterfield, maybe the developing didn't work out in Louisville. But that doesn't mean it can't work out here. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's hard pressed to say that no guy. I feel like it's hard to say nobody developed at Louisville. I mean, it's not like, look, Scott Satterfield. I know Louisville fans aren't. They're not. They threw a parade, I think, when he left, but still, I mean, it's not like they had no success at Louisville. I mean, last year it started rocky and they really rallied down the stretch. So, I mean, yeah, maybe at times. I think most of that is the quarterback position. They were a little bit, Malik Cunningham was a Bobby Petrino recruit. I think he brought in a couple other quarterbacks that maybe didn't pan out the way Louisville fans wanted. And maybe that's a dig, or maybe that's a knock on Scott Satterfield. He hasn't, it's been a little while since he's developed his own quarterback, had his own guy, and that guy's had success. But I think, look, you can still build here. I mean, Cincinnati's a great job, a lot of fertile recruiting ground. As long as you make a concerted effort, at least in the city of Cincinnati, there's a lot of talent out here, and in the state of Ohio too, as we saw Fickell do. Sure, he could develop guys, absolutely. I mean, it's a tough act to follow when you got Luke Fickell, who's, Ahmad Gardner is a nobody, and he's turned into a all-pro corner basically. But absolutely, I think he could come in here and he can come in and develop guys. I'm not terribly worried about that. It's not, why not? And there's gonna be hits and misses, right? Like Fickell had misses. There's guys you hit on, there's guys you miss. I think you got to give Satterfield a stake, and I don't think it's fair to say like, oh well, he hasn't developed. He didn't develop any guys at Louisville, or whatever Louisville fans want to say. And I don't know. I didn't know the Louisville roster very well. I don't know exactly what went on down there and everything that went into what happened there at Louisville with Scott Satterfield. But I think this is a good job, and I think the talent level, you're going to have to recruit at a higher level, but you should be able to get better players. we're out of the American now, the Big 12. Like, maybe you shouldn't have to do. You still have to develop guys, but maybe you're getting more finished products. Hopefully, that'd be the goal, right? Getting more of those 4-stars, and you have to mold guys, of course, but I think that'll play into it too. The level of guy that we're going to get hopefully rises as well.
Hopefully that's the case. And, well, this just got even better because right now we welcome in my successor at Bearcast Media. Nice backdrop you've got there. Sean McMahon, former sports director of Bearcast Media, and now, current valeter at Montgomery Inn and Montgomery Inn at the Boathouse. And you've I've heard you valeted Kirby Smart's car.
I did, actually. So this was, last May. It was Kirby Smart. Let's see. I did Brian Harson's car. If you guys know who Brian Harson was,
Yep.
Former Auburn head coach.
Yep.
I did his car. Bo Jackson, even.
Wow.
Done a few celebrities in my time.
Again, that's okay now because there is no more Bo Jackson curse in the city of Cincinnati, as we know. So Sean, Zach and I were just talking about Scott Satterfield and his recruiting abilities down at Louisville, which we all know were very good. But but as Louisville fans have told me ever since we hired him, the Bearcats hired him, those recruits really didn't pan out. The one thing that we were blessed with under Luke Fickell was recruiting and developing. Do you think Scott Satterfield can come into a program like Cincinnati and recruit, which, I mean, he's putting an emphasis, and Zach, we didn't talk about this yet, he is putting an emphasis on Ohio and Cincinnati. That's why he retained Kerry Combs and Walter Stewart. Do you think he comes in, Sean, and develops recruits better than he did at Louisville?
I mean, I think so. I think one thing that Cincinnati has that's really good is their administration. I think I know Louisville's administration is allegedly not as good as some other Power 5 schools. So I think that, and Scott Satterfield made great progress at Louisville, by the way, actually. I mean, he took Louisville, who kind of dropped off after Lamar Jackson left, and he brought them back to relevance. He brought them back to bowl games. He got them winning again. And that's really hard to do in general. So far, I mean, it's hard to really say. But I think just the fact that he was able to kind of revive a Power 5 program already, I don't see why he couldn't necessarily do it again. Now, I do think that we're not going to necessarily see the level of success that Luke Fickell had immediately. I don't think that's going to be the case at all, at least in year one. If we do see 10 wins in year one, I think everybody and their brother would be more than happy to see those kind of results. But whether or not that's going to happen, I don't know. And in all likelihood, probably not, because even Luke Fickell went 4-8 in his first year. So, I think it's going to be a couple of years before we can really say whether or not the recruits he's bringing in have panned out. If I'm an optimistic guy, so I tend to lean yes. I think he can, and I think he will. He doesn't have like a lot of notable NFL talent underneath his belt. But I don't doubt that he's been in the business long enough. I'm sure he knows what he's doing, and I'm sure, and he's gotten NIL together too. That's another thing he's done well. So I think his recruiting's great, and I think he'll work on development as well.
It's the lifeblood of the sport, recruiting, and the future of the sport, NIL. Now, Sean, you bring up an interesting point. Luke Fickell going 4-8 in his first season as head coach. But keep in mind what he was walking into. That was a disaster that he was walking into. And Zach and I were talking about this earlier, Sean, the Big 12 schedule, which is going to be a step up in competition. We know that. But, Sean, look who they avoid on the schedule. Kansas State, TCU, Texas Tech. They get Oklahoma at home. What a fun atmosphere that's going to be. That better be a nip and night game. Sean, I know you'll campaign hard for a nip and night game for that.
Oh, boy.
They go to BYU in September. I mean, you could go out there in November when it's colder. You go to Houston in November. Okay, better go then than in September when it's 110 degrees. You get UCF at home in November. Could be a cold weather game. You're at home the whole month of October. So considering this is their first season in the Big 12, the schedule, I think, shook out pretty nicely for them, wouldn't you say?
About as favorable as it could, yeah, I would say so. I mean, Oklahoma, they're going into year 2 with Brent Venables at the helm, and his recruiting class this year has been very good. Obviously, all those guys are going to be freshmen, but in the portal, he's also done pretty well. I'm focusing specifically on Oklahoma right now, just because they're kind of they're the name brand that Cincinnati's going to face this year. The other teams they're facing aren't the national powerhouses that Oklahoma historically has been for a very long time. But yeah, I think the schedule came out about as favorably as it could. It would be kind of fun to face Sonny Dykes, who literally just left the American just a year ago to go coach TCU. And, here we are facing him again in the Big 12. But yeah, I think for a first year, it's going to be a good introduction. I think it'll be a slow progression of, hey, this is Big 12 football. This, these are the big boys. So let's get ready to play some football.
I want to ask you both before we transition to the hardwood. Your expectations right now for the Bearcats in 2023.
Zach?
I would say that's a tough question, man. I think I've been saying this, 6 wins. Don't if you win less than 6 games, I'm a little disappointed. But if you get to 6 wins, I can't complain too much, right? Like, roster had to get, quite a bit of revamping on this roster, especially on the offensive side. I'd be tickled if they won 7 or 8, but if we go 6-6 in your first year in the Big 12, it's a step up, right? This is big. We're in the big time football now. So we can go 6-6. I'd be good with that. If you told me we're going to go 6-6, pretty much no matter what, I can't be too upset.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was going to say, Alex. I think 6 wins is an attainable number. I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility for UC to get 6 wins. Is it going to be a struggle? Heck yeah, it is. I mean, it's a struggle to win football games every time you play. But I think 6 wins is at least somewhat realistic. People might say it's a little optimistic for first-year head coach Scott Satterfield, but I think UC fans know this program well enough and how tough of a program Luke Fickell built. And even I would argue left behind. A lot of the players stayed behind, and they're going to be huge to the foundation of the toughness of this team. I mean, if you look at the schedule, I think there's a couple games you can chalk up as wins right now. You should, hypothetically on paper, be able to chalk up Eastern Kentucky and Miami as wins. You should be able to chalk those up as wins. Again, you play the games on the field. You don't play them on paper. So we'll have to wait till that time comes. But yeah, I think 6 wins is more than reasonable. And if they don't get that, it's going to be disappointing for sure, but it's growing pains. So.
Right.
I think if you go through the schedule, you can count wins. Eastern Kentucky, win. Miami, Ohio, win. Iowa State, win. Kansas
at home.
Yeah, that's a win.
Hopefully, we'll see. They shot out of a cannon last year,
right.
So
well, that they did. You're right. And then it's a matter of, can you steal wins against like Baylor at home? I mean, that's a game you UCF at home. If you can avenge what happened last year down in Orlando. Sean, I know you're big on the Bearcats beating UCF. Which they just did on the hardwood Saturday, which was always good to see. Let me ask you this, Sean. Zach and I were talking about this earlier. What are your thoughts right now on the quarterback room, specifically Evan Prater, who has started 2 games and struggled, but the circumstances surrounding those 2 starts may not have been the most ideal?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, it feels like one of the most loaded quarterback rooms I think UC's ever had. Whether or not it's actually going to be a good quarterback room or not, it certainly feels that way with Emory Jones transferring in, Ben Bryant, Evan Prater. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh. Like, well, we have Emory Jones, who started games in Power 5 play in the SEC, mind you. He's played some very, very tough football teams. So is he going to be a consideration? Yeah, absolutely. Ben Bryant has been the starter for this team over multiple seasons now. You go all the way back to 2019. He started the game against Memphis in the first week that we played Memphis. He started that game, and he started most of the 2022 season. So that's got to come into consideration. But also, you do have Evan Prater, who coming out of high school was a 4-star recruit and is talented, obviously has a lot of progress to make as a quarterback, and who's been here for a few years. So it's going to be tough. And you got Brady Lichtenberg coming in nonetheless either, and that's a very highly touted quarterback recruit. So what the heck do you do? I don't know. I really don't know. It's going to come down to the guy that's in the pocket. It's going to come down to the pilot in the cockpit kind of thing. Not to steal a line out of Top Gun, but anyway, that's really what's going to come down to, is who's going to perform the best at practice, and who does Coach Satterfield, or whoever the quarterback's coach is or is going to be, what are they going to go with? Who runs the offense the best? That's what it's going to come down to.
Zach, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think you want the best man to win, right? And last year, I think we talked about like Evan Prater, and everybody wanted him to win. It seemed like everybody thought like, oh, he's going to be the guy, but it's not just about like, oh, how high you're rated. And he was, obviously a really highly rated recruit, but it's the best man should win the job. And probably day one, Emory Jones, I'm sure, will have probably the edge just because of Scott Satterfield's guy. He's coming in as, the guy that Scott Satterfield brought in. So if you made me guess as to who the quarterback will be, then it'd probably be him. But also, like I mentioned earlier, it's not a terrible problem to have, right? Like, you have 4 guys that realistically, like, I think could start. Brady Lichtenberg hasn't played much, but like I said, people are really high on him and think he's going to be in the mix, and he's going to be expected to compete. So, yeah, I mean, it's not, at the end of the day, one of them might transfer, or maybe 2 of them might transfer. Who knows? But it's a bad problem to have, right? So it could be worse. Like Sean mentioned, it's a loaded quarterback room.
Let me add one more thing. I think, did I say Brady Lichtenberg or Brady Drogosh?
Brady Lichtenberg.
You said Lichtenberg.
But Brady Drogosh too, honestly. He's a true freshman.
Who I meant to say.
Okay.
That's who I meant to say. So you have 5 quarterbacks who could potentially realistically lead this team to wins. That's tough, man. I mean, it's going to come down to who is that guy who gives you the best chance at winning football games. And to have 5 options, that's really that's a great problem to have. I think any coach would kill to have that sort of dilemma. It's better to be overpopulated than underpopulated. So
sure.
UC fans are going to have to, it's going to be a huge announcement, whoever the quarterback ends up being. I don't think it'll be Brady Drogosh just simply because he's a freshman. I don't think it's going to be him. I agree with Zach. I think Emory Jones is kind of, if I had to bet on it, I would say he's the leading favorite. But I also wouldn't rule out Ben Bryant and Brady Lichtenberg and Evan Prater. You can't rule those guys out yet. So you have potentially 5 guys. It really, I would say, is 4, just because purely experience and, time with the team, or just in a Power 5 program. So it's tricky, but it's a fun situation. We'll see how it shakes out come August.
I think having 5 guys makes this a more interesting quarterback discussion than we had last year, because I think last year was, well, Ben Bryant's back. How much does that mean? Can Evan Prater close the gap? I mean, Evan Prater had more upside. Ben Bryant just had more experience, and it showed throughout the season. And that's ultimately why Ben Bryant started the first 11 games of the season. But it is going to be interesting to see not only who starts this year, but I think how the young guys like Drogosh develop. Can Evan Prater sort of revitalize his game under Scott Satterfield? I think there's a lot to this that I am really looking forward to see how that plays out in the spring and in the summer. We will switch gears after we hear from 2 of our sponsors to the hardwood, Bearcats men's basketball, as we head down the stretch in the regular season. We will do that after we hear from 2 of our sponsors. Zach Free, Sean McMahon, Bearcast Media reunion. Sean took over for me in 2021, a right-hand man for many, many years at Bearcast Media, building up the student-run media organization at the University of Cincinnati. And we have a lot of experience having covered Bearcats football and men's basketball. Heck, we even broadcasted games outside at Nippert Stadium in 35-degree weather during COVID. You guys remember that?
Yeah. It was a brilliant
I was
idea.
just talking about that earlier today, actually.
Fun times. Yeah, those were some fun times. But hey, I mean, at least we were fortunate enough to be able to really document one of the great UC football teams of all time.
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
We were there. We kind of saw it as well. Sean had saw only good seasons. We saw it from the bottom.
Yeah.
Getting it level to, almost to that playoff, but basically through the Peach Bowl, it was really cool to see, and kind of the unexpected, us going from 4 wins to having a 10-win season. It was kind of totally unexpected, which is really cool. I'd kind of go back to, if you would have told me like the night we won at the Rose Bowl at UCLA, like what would happen after that, man, what a ride we had. So it was fun. A lot of fun.
You go from the Hayden Moore days to the Desmond Ritter days. How about that?
Yep.
I don't think anybody will forget the Hayden Moore days. I mean, there were some. Now, Sean, you want to tell? I don't know how much my Locked On Bearcats audience knows this, but do you want to tell people what you kept telling me? And I'm sure you told Zach this throughout the 2018 season. You worked for the football team that year. What did you always say to me about Hayden Moore?
How exactly did I word it? I don't remember, but I think I said something. I said something along the lines of, I still think Hayden Moore is going to win us like a bowl game or something. I said something along those lines, and Ritter goes down, and guess who steps in? And let me tell you, that's a storybook ending. I know this is 4 or 5 years ago, but how about that storybook ending for Hayden Moore? Guy deserves it, more than anybody. He worked his tail off for the team. He struggled. He wasn't the greatest quarterback, but that was, I think, more due to circumstance than anything. So great way to end his career when he did.
No question about it. I mean, that was a very memorable game. Bearcats beating a familiar foe in Virginia Tech. Let's switch gears to the hardwood. I mean, here's the beauty of podcasting, or the unique thing about it is, I'm going to be full transparent here. So we recorded this yesterday afternoon. You're listening to this on Wednesday morning. You know the results of the Bearcats Tulane game. We recorded this Tuesday afternoon. We did not know, of course. But overall this season, Bearcats men's basketball. Zach, I know you go to all the home games. Sean, have you been to a game yet this year?
I actually haven't. I've been meaning to. I think I'm going to try to get to one before the season's over, because I haven't missed a basketball game or at least in a single season, I haven't missed a game since probably 2017. So I need to keep that streak alive.
Well, I mean, you got 3 home games left. 2 of them are they have something significant to them. Temple, which is going to be an absolute battle. SMU, which is senior day. That's the last home game for, David DeJulius. I don't think he can come back after this year. So. Right. He can't come back. So man, that COVID year throws everything off. Jeez. But your guys' thoughts overall on this team this year, because what I'm seeing is a team that is really fun to watch, but I just feel like there's something still more we need to see and something that we can tap into, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think right now they're playing probably their best basketball this season. The last couple games, even the loss to Houston, they played really well. That was you're up 11 with 10 minutes to go. It's a shame they couldn't pull it out, but I mean, all in all, it's a, when you compare it to what we saw last year, especially at home against Houston, where we got dog walked by 30, it's definitely some progress. But I think the thing missing, Alex, is okay, they just beat UCF at home, and UCF was at least a decent opponent. They're around the same as Cincinnati in terms of Ken Pom, around that 60 mark, which was nice. But can they go on the road and beat a good team? Like, can they close the deal? They almost did it with Houston, which would have been a monumental win. And I guess, tomorrow, as you're listening to this, you'll know, like, did they do it with Tulane? And Tulane's a team, they're playing really good basketball too. They just beat Memphis. We've seen it at home. They beat Tulane at home. They beat UCF at home. They can beat a team somewhat similar to them in terms of talent. But, okay, they're starting to play really good basketball. Can this team go on the road? And they're going to have 3 tough road tests left. You're going to Tulane, Memphis, and UCF. Like, can you win 2 of those 3? I think that's kind of the next step. Like, all right, can we really get in, behind Houston in that 2-3 spot? I think is the thing I think most fans of this team are waiting on.
Yeah, I agree with Zach wholeheartedly. I mean, Tulane's a good basketball team, and you do have some tough road trips. I mean, every time you go on the road, it's going to be a battle. I don't care who you're playing, especially when you go to East Carolina. Every time you go there, it's a freaking nightmare to play the Pirates. Yeah. It is. They always play well against us at home. UCF, I mean, despite how good of a performance UC put up, UCF was still battling towards the end. They had a chance to very well get back in that game against UC at home. And then Temple, always one of those schools that just fights hard. No matter how good of a team that you have, they're always a good team to play. Memphis obviously going to be really tricky, and Senior Day, if you can get a win on Senior Day versus SMU, that'd be huge. And I said this last year. I thought last year they could reach 20 wins, and I still think they could have. They just played some pretty bad, ugly games last year. But this year, they're sitting at 16-8. You've got quite a few games left. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games left. You can absolutely reach the 20-win mark, and I think that's a huge milestone because even Mick Cronin took a few years to get to the 20-win mark in the Big East days when he first took over as head coach. So I think for Wes Miller to reach 20 wins or 20-plus wins in his first year would be a huge step if he can get there. But if you want to talk about the postseason, which I know we're not on that topic yet, you're gonna have to fight hard, and you're gonna probably have to win the American Championship because right now Houston's basically got a golden ticket to get in, regardless of what happens to them, pretty much the rest of the season, I would argue. But
right,
you're gonna have to battle hard if you're UC.
I was gonna ask you guys, is there any way besides winning the conference tournament this team could make the NCAA tournament? And if not, what chance do you give this team to win the conference tournament? Because I think if they get Houston a third time, they could beat them, especially after what we saw the last time they played them.
I think that it's going to be really tough for them to get in at large. If you squint hard enough and if they were to win out and lose in the finals, I think they'd probably be in the first 4 out if that made me guess. So I think they're probably going to have to win the conference tournament. Just not enough quad 1 opportunities left. In terms of getting Houston, look, I think they could win the conference tournament. I don't think it's crazy. The problem will be, and that's why these road games against, UCF, Memphis, Tulane, obviously, that's why these are so important, because you want to be in the 2-3 seed. You don't want to be the 4 or the 5, because you're going to be on. Not only are you going to probably play, you're going to have a tough out in the first game probably, but you're going to get Houston. You want to get Houston in the finals. You want to limit as many tough matchups as possible. If you're getting in that 4 or 5 game, you're going to have a 3-game tough stretch there. That's why I think if they could get the 2 or the 3 seed, which would theoretically mean they're playing good basketball, I think they got a shot. Like, I think you've got a real shot of winning this thing, because they gave Houston everything they could handle. I think Houston made, if Jarris Walker was cyborg, I think Cincinnati gets out of there with he made every shot, 20-footer over 4 extended hands, fading away, getting just Jarris Walker made everything. I don't think if they played again, knock on wood, I don't think he'd go 8 for 10 on 15-foot contested jump shot. He could. I guess he's that good, I guess. But I don't know. That looked like if that team, that focused, disciplined, prepared team that played at Houston showed up, they could win this. They could win this. I think.
Sean?
Yeah, I think Zach makes a lot of great points there. And the thing about that game at Houston that made the difference in the second half was Houston just started making their shots. It was really that simple. Houston just, I don't want to say they couldn't miss, but it seemed like they couldn't miss, and they kept themselves in it. But if you go to UC schedule, they're 16-8. If they win the next 7, which is the last remaining regular season games, they'd be sitting at 23-8, which is a respectable record. But as Zach mentioned, you don't really have any quad one wins. You got nobody that you beat. You know, there's no moral victories in this game. It's not like the college football playoff where you say, oh, well, they almost, you know, like you look at Texas and it's like, oh, well, they lost Alabama by 1. In college basketball, it really doesn't work like that. It's more like, no, you lost. You that's it. You lost. You didn't get that win. So, you know, they didn't really have any opportunities outside of Houston to win big games. So, I mean, they had Ohio State, I guess, early in the season, and Arizona as well when they were in Maui.
Yeah.
So those would have been huge games. Xavier would be considered a good win as well, I guess. So I take it back. Those were actually, there were some pretty big chances. But yeah, I do think that they have a chance, but I think it is only if they win the tournament. And I think if you're Cincinnati, what you don't want to do, if you face Houston a third time, you might have their number. But ultimately, what you want is for, say, Memphis or maybe, who knows, Wichita State. Somebody just from left field just knocks them out of the tournament before you can even face them. So maybe that happens. Who knows? We don't know. These games have to be played out first. But yeah, I think Cincinnati, if that happens or if they faced Houston, I have faith that they could beat them. They almost did it in Houston. Why couldn't they do it in the tournament? So it's going to be tough, but they have a shot to get in, but not unless they win the tournament, in my opinion.
I think you're definitely both right. I think they're going to have to find a way to win the conference tournament to have any shot of going to the NCAA tournament. Now, I still think that can happen, especially if they're on that 2-3 line, because again, you don't want to face Houston until the championship game, and then maybe a team like Tulane or Memphis or Temple can take them out in the semifinals, and then you get one of those teams in the championship game, which would be really, really beneficial to the Bearcats. Guys, this was fun. Bearcast Media reunion. Zach, you got a good gig right now at Pro Football Focus, and you've got what, 2 podcasts? You've got the Rally Cap or the Rally Pod, and then you just unleashed a new podcast, the Freeze Frame podcast. So looking forward to listening to your first episode with ESPN college basketball analyst Mark Adams, one of my favorite people who I came across during my time at Cincinnati. Sean, you got your valet, and you're meeting a lot of great people, and
I'm at iHeart too. Don't forget that.
Yeah, how did I forget that? Yes, my old stopping grounds. So yes, you're currently at iHeart. You're working with the best, Mo, Lance, Scott Sloan, and I can see that you're still a Boston fan. So that is the band Boston. So
always. I'll be in Boston later this year, though, potentially for a valet trip. Yeah,
valet trip.
Live golf event potentially.
Nice. A live golf event. How about that? Yeah. All right.
Fun.
See, I haven't been to Boston since I was probably 11. So
interesting.
Being 22, it's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, just get yourself some Sam Adams and some Boston cream pie and some New England clam chowder, and you're good to go. So Sean McMahon, former sports director, Bearcast Media, succeeded me. Zach Freeze, our former right-hand man, former co-host with me on Sports Anyway You Want It, and our NFL show that we did with our another iHeart Media employee, Elliot Rearing. So band's still going strong, Bearcast Media. We built that staff into something, and look at all of us now, all venturing out into the world. So, guys, this was fun. Great to talk to you, and we'll do this again sometime.
Thanks a bunch, Alex. Appreciate it, man.
Wishing you all the best. I'll see you all when I get home this weekend at the in Ohio. So looking forward to that. Zach Freeze and Sean McMahon, kind enough to join me today right here on Locked On Bearcats. That's going to do it for me today. Later today, Russ Heltman and I will be with you with our live room lunch hour, 12:30. Looking forward to that. Recapping the Bearcats' previous 3 games against Tulsa, UCF, and Tulane. Looking ahead to Saturday's game against USF. Talking about the latest surrounding the football program and so much more. Thanks so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. Thanks for your second listen. Check out our brand college basketball experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton, bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on Twitter at Frankie_Natty with 2 N's and an ATI. Instagram, AlexFrankNout_, and email alex3frank@gmail.com. Zach's on Twitter at Freezy27. Sean, I believe, is on Twitter, but I am not sure of his name. So he is on Instagram at Sean. I don't know if I should be saying his Instagram, but yeah. Okay, I'll leave it there. All right. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. I'm Alex Frank for Locked On Bearcats. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll be back later today with Russ Helbin at 12:30 Eastern Time, and I'll be back on Friday with a new episode to round out the week right here on Locked On Bearcats.